A&M finally did it. And A&M did it following a 51-10 victory up against Mississippi State, who also saw their coach get fired. Now, Zach Arnett was the first-year head coach of Mississippi State, taking over for Mike Leach after Mike Leach, unfortunately, did pass away. So you could maybe just argue maybe they never really believed in Zach Arnett long-term, and he's like 36, 37 years old. But when you have a coach die, which was just absolutely horrible with how much Mike Leach is beloved, you quickly got to go find someone else. And, Arnett maybe just knowing some of those players at the time was perceived to be the best guy for the job. And I think a lot of people viewed him as a stopgap hire before a year or two from now, barring a miraculous season for Mississippi State, that they would probably be in the market for a new coach, because it's always tough to replace a legendary coach. It's one thing, though, when the coach loses. It's another thing when the coach, in just horrible fashion, literally dies. So that's a very tough situation there at Mississippi State. And now they'll start their search for their next new head football coach. But to Jimbo Fisher, it wasn't a matter of if he should be the head coach at A&M any longer. We all knew that ship did sail. We all knew that Jimbo Fisher was past his prime, far away from the days of winning a national championship at Florida State. Outside of the COVID season, really did nothing at A&M. And when you watched A&M under Jimbo Fisher, I didn't see really any difference compared to the A&M under Coach Sumlin, who they got rid of in order to bring in Jimbo Fisher. Now, the one thing I'll give credit to Jimbo is that the last 2 years, he has done a kick-ass job on the recruiting trail. In 2022, they were number 1, and they were top 10 in 2021 in terms of recruiting. I think they were 8th. But when you have all that talent, and you have high expectations, and when people are talking about you as a dark horse to win the SEC or one of the more talented teams in the country, when there's maybe only 2 or 3 other rosters that you could argue you would want in the SEC, you can't afford to bottom out. And last year, they bottomed out. They went 5-7. So going into this year, just being above 500 wasn't going to be good enough. And we talk about records, and then we talk about sometimes records being misleading, where you could have a decent record, a solid record, but it's where your standards are and what are your expectations. And for Jimbo Fisher this year, at best, in the final 2 games of the season, he could be 8-4, and then if they win a bowl game, 9-4. So you could look at that record and go, oh, Zach, 9-4 isn't terrible. But let's take a deep dive into that record. Big game week 2. Miami, you got smacked in the second half. You played Alabama, had Alabama on the ropes. Your coach got conservative. You lose to Tennessee, who isn't the same Tennessee as a year ago. And probably the final nail in the coffin here for Jimbo Fisher, or the thing that just reiterated that they have to get the boosters and the donors to pay the $70 million buyout, even though Ole Miss is having a really good season, it was another game that they lost. So it's like you have a coach that could get the talent in there, but what do you do with the talent? And another thing is, this is why I was not a Jimbo Fisher fan. It's also why when Dan Mullen was at Florida, I was not a fan of Dan Mullen. And it's why I'm not a fan of James Franklin at Penn State. I understand there is a recruiting brilliance to every time a coach is in front of a podium, every time a coach is holding a press conference. But when coaches lose and try to tell you it's not as bad as it seems, or they almost act as if they win following a loss, or make excuses and just say things that are nonsensical, it drives me crazy. Like when I talk to my doctor, and I have pretty good blood pressure, but Zach, what makes your blood pressure rise? It is when a coach says something that's extremely stupid following a loss. So in this case with Jimbo Fisher, this was actually following a win. So it was only a 10-minute press conference. I watched the entire thing. So congratulations, coach. You beat a bad Mississippi State team 51-10. You're 6-4. You're still underachieving this season. And this was Jimbo Fisher talking to the media after the game. And when I heard this, I said, hold on. I gotta run that back. You know, Zach, maybe you're a little bit tired. Zach, maybe you had a long weekend. I heard this last night. Oh, Zach, maybe it was after the 8-hour marathon of Ion football. Maybe you're a little loopy. Did you have a cocktail after Ion football? Like, there's no way this coach actually said this. But this is what Jimbo Fisher had to say following the Mississippi State game.
Coach, you have a night like tonight where you're using your third-string quarterback and you play as well as you do. Does it just make this season just that much more frustrating and head-scratching for you?
No, it's not frustrating. I mean, disappointing at times. Like I said, we're 3 or 4 plays from playing in a playoff spot. But that's we got to put that past us and got to grow from it and learn from it for next year. But we got to finish out this year. Right there, we're 6-4. Need to be the best 7-4 team in the country and the best 8-4 team in the country. That's our goal, and it's what we can control right now. But no, I don't dwell on those things right now. I live in the moment, and that's getting ready. We got to be ready to play Abilene Christian next week.
Down front left, Mark.
A few plays away from contending for the college football playoff? On what field? In what sport? What team are you watching? You got smacked by Miami in the second half. That's not a few plays. You lost to Alabama. You lost to Tennessee. You lost to Ole Miss. You want to tell me, okay, those games were close? A few plays go your way? Yeah, in each of those games. But overall, you guys have never looked like a threat. You guys have never been a force. You've never been a team outside of brand recognition and the talent that you have that anyone's shaking in your boots when they go up against you. Because everyone knows A&M is all sizzle under Jimbo Fisher. They're all hype. They're all talk. And outside of 2020, when you get on the damn field, this team isn't a juggernaut. This team isn't a force. This team doesn't spark fear in the actual big dogs in the SEC and in college football. So that's really, I had enough of Jimbo Fisher before them. I am not a fan of Jimbo Fisher, but to try to dress up your season following a win and trying to tell people, yeah, we're a few plays away from making the college football playoff. If you had 2 losses on the season, okay, I could see it. If you had 1 loss on the season and it just didn't play out in your favor, okay, I could see it, coach. I could rock and roll with that, coach. I think I'm a pretty understanding person.